Thank you for joining. I'm Karen Falcone, and I'm a Senior Director of Marketing at Juniper Networks, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar. I'm very lucky today to be joined by Ray Mota, the founder of ACG Research, and Liliane Offredo, a Principal Analyst at ACG. Ray is responsible for the carrier strategy and infrastructure, as well as SD-Wan at the ACG Group, and is a well-respected expert in his field. Prior to founding ACG, Ray held positions as both an analyst as well as a network operator. On a personal side, Ray holds 13 amateur baseball World Series titles and has coached at the professional level. In October of 2000, HispanicBusiness.com selected Ray, along with Sammy Sosa and Alex Rodriguez, as one of the top 100 most influential Hispanics in the United States. Liliane is a principal analyst at ACG, and she covers the evolution of the broadband infrastructure. She works on research discussing how broadband, as well as other technologies, are driving a profound change in our world. Before joining ACG, Liliane was well known in the telecom industry, holding various positions at Time Warner Cable, where she was instrumental in the launch of voice services, as well as for defining a roadmap and infrastructure for converged services. Liliane has an MBA from Harvard Business School, a master's in electrical engineering from Cornell, and a BSEE from Syracuse University. Ray, over to you. Let's kick this webinar off.
Thank you, Karen, and welcome everyone. It's an honor to be here presenting on this particular topic. Let me start off by sharing some screens here first. And it's good to be presenting with Liliane, who's also an expert in the cable MSO space. So if we look at the first half of the year, and this becomes an important part for all the MSPs in the audience, that if we look at, when we looked at the numbers in January 1st, we know that, over the last 2 years before that, the pandemic in 2020 had a global impact on GDP. But then we see that the IMF and World Bank over the last projection has had positive GDP growth. Specifically, if you look at 2022, in January is projected to be a global GDP about 4.2%. And that led to a lot of positive outlook and a lot of spending from not just service providers and telcos, but also different factors regarding enterprise. We saw that wireline and wireless was projected to be up. One was about 4.8, the other one was about 9.6. But even enterprise IT, they were in a situation where they saw opportunities to justify the spending, and the web scalers, the Google, the Amazon, the Microsoft also saw a double-digit expansion. So that's where the year started. But one of the things we want to do is make it current, right? And if we look at the current market, is that there is a little bit of uncertainties when we look at the unprecedented macro climate, and some of these numbers are recent. We're seeing in Europe the geopolitical instability that's going on. We see in the US civil unrest, and we're seeing inflation rates that literally are what we call third world level countries inflation rates, and even interest rates. We see that we're getting interest rates for the point that they need to react to slow down the economy. And then we have the global supply chain issues. And just recently, we saw that the global GDP has been downgraded to about 2.9%. And inflation rate in the US is projected to be about 9.1. And the CPI is going to be announced today, and that's the highest it's been in 41 years. Now, the reason I bring that up is because it becomes an important factor when it's related to managed service. When we look at managed service from the perspective of when is a good opportunity for managed service to accelerate, is that anytime there's the perceived implosion of economic concern, enterprises tend to focus more on their core competency. So if they make shoes, they make tables, they end up focusing more on that, which creates a tremendous opportunity for MSPs to go in there and say, let us handle the rest for you, and you focus on your core competencies. So what we're seeing is that from an enterprise perspective, they're accelerating their digital transformation at a rate that we've never seen before. So they're developing these digital assets and mapping it to existing process, or newer process in order to provide a much higher level of customer experience, because from the executive level, they spent so much money to acquire the customer, they need to be able to maintain that customer. But while this is all going on, we're seeing security attacks and ransomware and cyber threats still be top of mind for executive. So security is as strong as your weakest link, and that moving up in the supply chain. But we're getting a lot of enterprises literally looking at, how do I automate much of my tasks? How do I bring more intelligence? And whether I partner with an MSP, how do I find an MSP that I trust, that could give me a level of control and visibility? So even though there's economic uncertainties, MSPs can identify an opportunity in that area. And if we look at SD-Wan, it's not new, right? The concept is not new, but the concept of bringing automation and AI to it is a new factor in focusing on operation, and creating more profitability. Because if we look at, from a projection point of view, SD-WAN is projected to be about $3.6 billion in 2023. And we're seeing that in North America. It's the primary gist of the market, and overall America represents about 50%, but we're seeing Asia Pac and EMEA have a double-digit CAGR growth. And the use cases that we see from a lot of the enterprise is hybrid cloud, because of the efficiencies to be able to say, I've got a primary MPLS link, I got a secondary, let's move the secondary MPLS link into a layer 2 or broadband connections and do the savings for that area, but also having application visibility in what we call cloud-friendly applications. And then another one that's important is not just on a cloud-friendly application, but also what we call fast connectivity, whether they want an LTE or 5G connection in case it takes too long to provision the fiber or the connection for that. They can bring up a branch office for retail or for oil refineries. So we're seeing tremendous opportunities. But the new thing with SD-WAN is this concept of bringing AI and more automation to it, right? So as an MSP, what you should do is focus on what we call creating a virtualized business architecture, right? And for this virtualized business architecture is you don't just focus on connectivity and the underlay, right? The underlay is where you're very strong at, right? In that area, but look to see who you can partner with from a CPE kind of discussion. Usually when I get involved from the endpoints and work my way up from there, because I literally talk to a customer, says, what problem are you trying to solve, right? And then from that area, you need to look at SD-WAN, what we call as a platform for innovation. I mentioned that SD-WAN is projected to be about 3.9 in 2023. Well, if you look at additional applications, whether they're security applications, load balancing application, any of those additional, some people call them VNF, some people call application, the size of that number is 3 times to 4 times the number that you see in SD-WAN. So look at it as a race to own that platform with SD-WAN and be able to add and provision these new value-added services that in many cases brings a higher margin for you. And then what you should do is project what your TAM is, what vertical focus, what your pricing profitability, and be able to maximize that. And then be able, in the left side, map to say which vendors are able to get me to market quicker, which vendors are able to optimize my costs, and which vendors are able to give me or increase my TAM for that. So this becomes an important architecture. Now, when I get a discussion, I usually get the call saying, well, Ray, I've got automation in that. And the problem we see today is that we see what we call way too many silos of automation, right? And they need to re-examine the capabilities because you're not gaining the full benefits. And I think this is where AI comes into play in creating this cross-domain type intelligence that you could have automation across domain concept there. So there's opportunities for enterprise, and MSPs need to be able to move at this faster rate to react because the enterprises are accelerating. It used to be when I talked to these enterprises about digital transformation, it used to be just slideware. Now they're actually calling us saying, how do I move this much quicker? In different verticals are moving at a much faster rate. So this concept of AI ops, I think it becomes an important concept, because when we talk to MSPs or we talk to enterprise, when we look at traditional automation, on top of the silos of automation, there seems to be a lack of security, lack of visibility and insight and understanding the data, and not enough real-time visibility to be able to make decisions. So this new AI concept is able to allow them to scale while not compromising any capabilities moving forward, right? And if we look at what the TM forum kind of broke it down into 4 categories, they said, with AI into automation tools, you focus on customer experience. And it's interesting because customer experience is becoming a higher and higher priority at the executive board level. So there's the parts about reducing the OpEx by using closed loop automation, increasing the performance and reducing the number of outage. We just saw some recent ones in Canada for that, but then also creating a level of efficiencies from day one all the way to ongoing, because it's not just the onboarding process, it's the ongoing maintenance of supporting in the life cycle of your system. So taking a step back, moving it up a level, as you do this, right, for the MSPs that are in the audience, they need to be able to create some type of demographics for that area and be honest and have integrity to say, these are the particular markets, whether I focus on large enterprise, whether I focus on SMB, and then identify the employee rate, percentage rate, but then understand or get a company that's able to understand your demographics and say, in the markets that we attack, what is the propensity to buy and what is the willingness to pay, right? And once you identify propensity to buy, willingness to pay, you're able to develop these services much quicker, but then from an enterprise perspective, be able to offer a level of discount that these enterprises expect and a level of visibility and control that they expect. So this is something that becomes important. And if we look at, I just talked about the second half of some of the macro climate, is that if we look at present mode of operation today, if you don't bring level of AI ops into your delivery of the service, capital intensity is projected to be up 17%. So that means regardless, if you don't do anything, the cost of doing business is going up without implementing the level of intelligence and the level of efficiencies that will not only impact customer service, it would impact profitability on your overall service. So one of the things that I want to shift gears to is that I want to talk about some economic modeling, because it's always good to talk about technology, but if you can't map technology to economic benefits or outcomes for that piece, you're just talking technology for technology's sake. And realize this is a hypothetical. You can contact your Juniper rep where they subscribe to the BAE software, and you could do some economic model, and I'll go further into that. But for this hypothetical, what we wanted to do is compare present mode of operation when the service you're delivering versus some of the Juniper solutions, and realize these could be a combination of any of the products. Where we looked at their SSR product, we looked at the MISC, and then the cloud managed solution, and then what would it be compared to when you don't have AI ops capability built into it, right? So as we look at some of the models there, the products that we use the Juniper SSR, which brings a level of WAN assurance. It brings AI, ML, it has all the data insights, and it has the cloud. So that focuses on the WAN connectivity. And then we have the MISC products from an AI wireless, and the MISC from the EX switches. So by combining these two solutions together, you're able to offer a complete area of addressing a managed service, not just in managed WAN. There's a new area that's picking up steam, which is managed LAN as well. And the market for that is about a $45 billion market in the next 5 years, which is huge. So by doing this, being able to deliver these services and simplify the operations and be able to have intelligence that can help you point and remediate the problem was the purpose of doing this model, right? So with the BAE system, we decided to put in, all these parameters, compare it to present mode of operations. And the BAE system is for anyone that's using Excel to do any economic models on IT networks or any complex should be considered BAE. And again, you can contact Juniper so they can actually customize a model for you. And not only customize a model for you, also tell you what the opportunities in TAM and based on your pricing, what your target profitability is, right? So if we look at this, when you do a model, you have to decide who are the tenants, what are the tenants they start for. These tenants need to connect to some endpoints, and these endpoints need to be able to connect to some services, and then these services connect to resources, and then these resources reside in a data center, the cloud, from that capability. And when you do these particular inputs, right, from that area, you're able to look at and create a model that you're able to create outcome. And if we look at some of the OpEx assumptions from when it gets to onboarding from day one all the way for that, we've seen a tremendous amount of benefits when it looked at identifying labor costs and other things associated with replacement and ongoing management and that piece of troubleshooting. And we've seen initially that it resulted in about a 90% reduction in the labor cost. So if you're not doing AI ops, you might question, well, 90% seems high. I've seen some cases that it's even higher. In your case, might be lower. Again, work with Juniper to customize what those numbers are. And if we look at it from a TCO perspective, we've seen that compared to present mode of operation, overall, when you start looking at wireline, wireless, and SD-WAN with the SSR, we're seeing 85% OpEx saving and an overall TCO savings. And on the SD-WAN, when I talk about it, Juniper offers the tunnel-free type capability, which also address some of the bandwidth efficiencies. So you see from an economic perspective, there's benefits across the board from the payback period, from the ROI, and the margin, because again, you spend so much money to acquire that customer. A priority is, how do I maximize that customer? How do I go deeper and wider? And how do I maintain that customer to increase the lifetime value of that customer? So for now, what I like to do is shift it over to my colleague, Liliane. Liliane?
Yes, thank you, Ray. And hello, everyone. Thank you for making time. Ray, you want to drive the slides? Okay, thank you. So Ray talked about AI ops. He talked about managed services and importance of managed services in the enterprise. I want to talk about how we're going to a new paradigm where some of these enterprise-grade solutions are going to be delivered in a home, in the residential environment, and what does that mean for operators who serve these this market, and what are the opportunities? So as Ray shared, we talked about digital transformation. I think now we're talking about digital acceleration. During the pandemic, we've seen a momentous growth in transformation. Things like activities that usually would take 300 and some days happen in about 10 days because, of course, based on need. We see now hybrid is the new normal. Work from home is the new normal. Hybrid work models. Healthcare is going hybrid, and other services in different verticals as well. What is also happening specifically in the last mile is massive investment in broadband deployments across the world, and certainly notably in the US, because everybody realized that broadband is an essential utility, and people who don't have it are at a significant disadvantage. We all have being made aware of the disparities in education, in healthcare, and other services, certainly work from home as well. And I'll share some information about that. And so what you're starting to see is that mission critical services are delivered in the home. Healthcare is a huge area of innovation in this space, and we'll talk about some of this in a few minutes. Certainly, work from home requires a different level of reliability that somebody who's just streaming and so on. So what we are going to need are new solutions for the home environment, new business models, and so on. Because if you think of the traditional model where a service provider is delivering broadband and some other services and being paid by a subscriber, now we're going to see that maybe the paying entity is not the person who lives in the home, but maybe a company, an enterprise, or a healthcare provider, or a health insurance company, and so on. So we might be seeing very complex billing models and so on. And of course, the complexity of these services that are going to be delivered in the home are going to require a different set of capabilities that don't exist today, and certainly will need very sophisticated capabilities in terms of service management and so on, which are going to be emerging. And the operators who serve the last mile are, if they get this right, they have a tremendous opportunity to capture here. Next slide, please. Just a quick glance into some of the investment in broadband deployments. The US certainly is leading the pack with $73 billion over that, actually. The BEAD program is broadband equity and access that was born in November 21 as part of the infrastructure bill that was passed by Congress. That's about $42.5 billion. And in addition to what you see here in the US, there's about $14.2 billion as part of the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is more of a subsidizing demand, providing subsidies to subscribers who have a demonstrated need, who cannot afford broadband based on some income criteria and so on. And you see the investment happening in the rest of the world. So what this is doing is driving massive activity in terms of deployments by existing operators, but also a lot of entrants. Next slide, please, Ray. So, for example, certainly we'll talk about cable because that's sort of the focus of this talk, but certainly you see AT&T committing to deploy 30 plus million fiber passings over the next few years. You see municipalities like Baltimore City, City of Baltimore deploying their own or planning to deploy their own fiber. And so on, and certainly fixed wireless and satellite, low orbit satellite technologies as well. So cable operators are doing massive deployments here. Greenfield, certainly they're adding passive optical networking to supplement their existing infrastructure, which SFC, the hybrid fiber coax plant that they traditionally have operated. They're looking to expand and in some cases overbuild in some areas. They do have some advantages because they have fiber and power in the access network. And of course, they're introduced a lot of technologies and capabilities to enable those expansions. Next slide, please. Right. Just to talk about some of the services delivered in the home. I don't really need to talk much about work from home. We've all done it. We're doing it as we speak. But healthcare has seen a momentous shift over the past couple of years. Some of these things that you see here are actually not new. We started with, of course, telehealth, but age in place has been something that people have been working on for a number of years, which is senior people wanting to stay in their home and receive solutions that enable them to access the healthcare, but general care that they need, and to have some monitoring to prevent for fall prevention, medication adherence, and things like that. And of course, we've seen the unfortunate situation with nursing homes during the pandemic, so that even gave a bigger boost to this trend. Chronic care management, sadly, about 50% of US adults have hypertension, and a significant portion of the population diabetes. And it's clinically proven that some of these services, people need to monitor these conditions on a regular basis, not once a year or twice a year when they see their doctor. That's whole research that the healthcare industry is doing. And so these are some technologies now that are used in the home. That it's called remote patient monitoring, which is an exploding space. Home hospital is actually something that was something started in about 2016. And this is about delivering acute care level of care, even instead of going to the emergency room, having people stay in their home, particularly in rural areas where there are not a lot of hospitals. And so this is, for example, you can see a less qualified or less trained healthcare professionals like ambulances and so on, delivering EMS level service, delivering care in the home, but they're actually have remote higher expertise doctors and so on, giving them guidance and so on in real time. So you can see how some of these services will require much more different services. Of course, gaming, streaming, and metaverse, that's beginning to become the new thing right now. So you can see how the infrastructure in the home, the type of services, the type of management of these services, the type of intelligence are going to have to change. And I think there's an opportunity here for a significant amount of innovation. And next slide, please. So just a few points about healthcare, significant growth. This whole trend of the healthcare moving to the patient is something the industry is very, very committed to. And I think you've seen also, the regulation is beginning to align. And of course, healthcare, everything is about regulation. And there were some temporary relief in terms of regulation that were put in place during the pandemic. Some of them are actually going to become permanent. And there are a lot of debates right now between, Congress, CMS, which is the Center for Medicaid and Medicare, and other government entities are trying to figure out the regulatory environment going forward for enabling these services at home. But it is an exploding area. You can see the CAGR and the size of the market, and this is the US alone. It's generally estimated that the US is about 4 years ahead of the rest of the market, or of course, maybe some other parts of the market. We talked briefly about the three areas, major areas, although there are others, more home hospital age in place and chronic care management. Thank you. Next, please. Yes, thank you. In terms of work from home, I don't really need to talk too much about this. 25% of professional jobs in North America will be remote by 2022. Most companies think that hybrid is part of their method of operation, and I think employees increasingly expect it, so we can just move on because it's something we already know. Next, please. So we started to talk about this, and back to some of the things that Ray was talking about. We're talking about very complex services that need to be delivered in the home. Certainly reliable broadband, and upstream and downstream cable traditionally has been, the cable plant has been more focused downstream because that's what initially the plant was more designed for that, although there's a lot of work going on to provide more upstream bandwidth in the industry right now. You need Wi-Fi coverage across the home, and not just any Wi-Fi. It has to be intelligent Wi-Fi, managed Wi-Fi, because now you have a patient who needs to have this accessibility to broadband anywhere in the home. And that's going to be a huge deal going forward. And some of the services that traditionally were, born for the enterprise may need to be tailored for a home environment. Some applications will require some guaranteed bandwidth. Ray talked about SD-Wan. Wireless backup, again, some of the capabilities that an SD-WAN kind of capability could enable in a home environment. We talked about installation can become very complex, and now we're talking about installation of very complex services, monitoring, upgrades, change management, and so on. And now we have not just the telecom services, but there could be integration with some other services, which could be healthcare or some other industry-specific services that have to be integrated and managed, and so on. And of course, predictive maintenance, analytics, all the things that Ray talked about in terms of AI ops. Although, of course, we're a long way from being at that level. I think I see the direction of, it's more of a direction of the industry. Clearly zero trust, high levels of security, edge compute, and so on. And so, I think what's important here is that there's going to be a significant amount of change and innovation, and if service is evolving very rapidly. So this is certainly one of the key drivers for managed services. And certainly, of course, for the software kind of enabling infrastructure that needs to be enable these services as well. The move by the healthcare industry to deliver services in the home is certainly driven by medical needs, what's right for the patient, but it's also about cost. And there are studies that say that about 30% of a hospital operating cost is the plant itself, maintaining the building and all the equipment and so on. So you can start to see how there's a tremendous amount of savings. Plus, the studies say that patients being treated in the home can heal faster and so on. So that's, again, a great outcome from a healthcare perspective, but it's a lower cost as well. So delivering lower cost services in terms of CapEx and OpEx is very important in the home. And of course, a good customer experience. And, in some cases, there's going to be not just, looking at NPS scores and so on. We're going to be talking about SLAs because, again, some of them are mission critical kind of services. So we're going to see the need for more agile solutions delivered in the home, AI and automation, and reporting and so on. They're in the home. Next slide, please, Ray. Thank you. Yeah. So I think we've talked a bit about this, the ability or the need to adapt existing, in some cases, existing services and capabilities to a new environment. I think that's a big undertaking. There's a lot of work going on. The cable industry is doing a lot of work in this space already at the more in the cable labs and SCTE to understand the need and the requirements and try to start to think of some of these capabilities and how to deliver them and what they mean and so on. So there's already some preliminary work going on. And back to the pyramid that Ray shared, where he says at the bottom there's a 66 million home small businesses. Maybe that pyramid at some point is going to be extended with a larger layer at the bottom, which is the home. Clearly, we're talking about initially a small penetration here. This is not going to be overnight a big market, but I think this is a time to innovate and start to think of these solutions and of these services and what's needed going forward. And so this is the broadband operators who serve the homes are in a great position to deliver this, but they have to work with their vendors. And the vendors this is a great time for vendors to innovate and create these services, working with the operators to satisfy this need. Next slide, please. Thank you. And just to note that all of the things we're talking about here, some of these services are not new to the cable industry. So certainly this is a quick snapshot of some of the managed services they already deliver. managed Wi-Fi, managed SD-Wan, managed security, managed routers, and so on. So the point is the enterprises already has all the complexities and the need for service managed services that Ray has talked about. So there's already a lot of capabilities in the industry, at least in the business segments, to deliver some of these services. And now this is going to start to think of how we can take what these services and move them to a new paradigm. Final slide, please, Ray. Just final couple of thoughts. Back to Ray talking about AI. It is going to be at the fundamental runtime of everything we do. This is the future. And I'll submit to you that I think typically the broadband industry thinks of business and residential as two separate businesses or business lines. I think those lines are going to blur, and I think there's going to be a lot of cross-pollination between the two segments, these two segments. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Liliane. That was really great information. We totally appreciate it. I do have a few questions from the audience if we have a bit of time. So we'll take a few if we can do that.
Sure.
Ray, there's a handful kind of across the same thing. So I'll sort of sum it up for you. But folks are wondering, in terms of MSP delivered or do it yourself, what does that look like? Like, what's the percentage of enterprises that are looking for managed service? Who's doing it themselves? Is there a geographical component to this? Do you have any feeling around that?
That's a question that I get quite a bit, often, especially for the larger enterprise that have a certain level of skill set. So I'll start off initially by saying that if you look at the origin of SD-WAN, it initially started as a DIY concept, right? Where a lot of enterprises weren't happy with the level of operations and management they were getting from their MSPs. And they thought that, that SD-WAN could solve that. But what they realized is a lot of them didn't have the skill sets, and it was more complicated than it was. So yes, it started out initially as a DIY, but what started happening is it was too complex for them to do, which created a tremendous opportunity for the MSPs to say, we know how to build scalable, reliable, secure networks in that area. So right now we're seeing the numbers that it went from almost 100% where it started DIY to only about 17% are doing DIY. So it's moving very, very rapidly. And I think with some of these uncertainties that I just talked about with these macro climates, that number is accelerating even more and more. And I think that discussion it's changing to a little bit like, hey, here's the challenges that I have, not whether I want to do DIY or not. How could you help me offset some of these challenges there?
Yeah, that makes sense. But that's a higher percentage than I thought, but that's great to know. There's a couple of questions around AI. So I'll start with Ray, and then maybe Liliane, since you ended with your discussion around AI, maybe we could get an answer from both of you. But it's largely around the idea that AI is becoming more mainstream. And do you both see that happening? And Liliane, you referred to it, so obviously you do. Does it only relate to SD-WAN, and does it relate at all to your TCO that you were talking through? So Ray, I'll start with you, and then Liliane, you can give us your thoughts after.
Sure, I can start off, and it's an important question because if we look at the concept of AI, artificial intelligence, right? Those algorithms, we've been using those back for the last 30 to 40 years, right? So many of them are still being used today. The difference is that a lot of the complexity before you needed like a PhD in-house to actually implement those within your organization. Now, a lot of that complexity is moved to the cloud. So these enterprises can focus on what the input parameters are, what problem they're trying to solve, and bring it up to the cloud, and it'll do the simplification for them. So we're seeing AI, not just in SD-WAN, we're seeing in all sorts of innovation. SD-LAN, we're seeing it for security, for like things with miss on how to troubleshoot, to identify and remediate the problems quicker. And I think because of this cloud concept, has been able to implement at a much faster rate, that you don't care what the algorithms are. You say, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve. Which solution could I implement best for that? And I think because of this digital acceleration, MSPs need to make it transparent for the customers. And when we look at the models, you look at those OpEx savings, right? It was about 90% plus. I'm usually the conservative person when it gets to TCO, right? And it was 90%. That's the level of efficiency that you could gain when you start looking at what your labor components are, doing it yourself, and even manage it yourself from a MSP perspective.
Thanks. Liliane.
Yeah, in terms of cable, I think I see this more directionally happening. So if you think of the traditional infrastructure of the cable industry is much more of a hardware-based, specialized components with manual SNMP and CLI and so on to manage. But what's happening, driven by the need and of course the development in the market and what's happening in the industry overall, you're seeing a lot of move to software, and this whole move towards what the industry calls the distributed access architecture. So they're moving, a lot of they're keeping the software in the central office, what's the equivalent of the central office, which is called the head end, and removing some of this physical layer to the access network. And now what they can do, now that it's software, back to what Ray was talking about, it can be run in the cloud. And now you have some of these capabilities to, I wouldn't call it yet AI, I would call it more ML. It's directionally going there, but of course AI needs a lot of data, right? You can't just get there right away. You need a lot of data to start with, but a lot of I see the vendors creating some of these solutions, and I see some operators themselves creating, like an example is Comcast talking about predicting fault and repairing fault before they happen, and so on and so forth. So it's definitely the trend. It's just going to take some time, because in terms of the enterprise tends to move faster, but in terms of the operators, you have all this, it's not just having the technology, it's how to use it and methods and procedures. It just takes time to propagate through the company. So it just takes more time, but the trend is definitely there.
Excellent. Thank you. And I think I get this question every time I'm on a webinar, but Ray, for you, are you seeing any impact from the global supply chain issues? Is that SD-Wan? Is it impacting managed services, AI? Have you seen any follow-up from the global supply chain issues?
I mean, there's points of it where, you look at certain traditional routing and stuff like that, where things that used to take 90 days are taking like 300 days. So it's a valid concern, but I think that even validates the point more of moving to this software type concept, right? So that you can focus on somewhat being agnostic of the hardware or CPE device. So like if you look at the SSR from that perspective, becomes this software component that offers a variety of CPE type connection. So that gives the flexibility for an MSP that if they're dealing just with one vendor hardware only, they don't have as much flexibility from the CPE side. So I think if anything, with the MSPs in the group, this movement to software and finding vendors that could support multiple becomes an important concept to address it. But it's a valid concern, though. Yeah.
If I may add, because I've done a lot of research on this in terms of the cable industry, it's definitely transformative. And it's a big problem because cable is notorious for having a lot of industry-specific components. And so what I'm seeing, a lot of end of life of some older equipment and a faster move to software, like we talked about. Now you have multiple sources for when it's off-the-shelf server. It's different when you have this rack that needs this very specialized components and so on. So, and then it's an unfortunate situation, but it's in a way, I hope it's driving this move to software and virtualized solutions even faster.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Liliane. Thank you. And I think we could probably take one more question. And so, Ray, there's a few questions on the economic modeling that you did. So can you just give us a little background on, what was your methodology? and how do we access information like that, and where are you, what tools are you using?
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, and I probably should have mentioned, we've done some white papers on this, which Juniper will be able to share or provide the links to the people that have registered. We've done it on the enterprise and an MSP point of view. We've even done a technical detail on the tunnelless type offering where it gets into the advantage of that piece. So in those white papers, we get into the value and how the models were created, everything. So it's total transparency. So it's worthwhile for the audience to request those. Now, regarding the model, ACG, a few years back, we developed an economic modeling tool, because what we started seeing in the industry is that, doing economic models, especially when you start looking at AI, automation, virtualization, software, doing it in a traditional way in Excel, which doesn't have regression tests, is a tabular format. By the time I walk out the door, that TCO, it's outdated, and it becomes very difficult to maintain for the MSP. So they're like, hey, Karen, I want to expand my TAM to add this vertical or expand to this region or these cities. Building that and to maintain, it becomes very difficult. So with this tool, they're able to build these economic models in a matter of seconds or minutes compared to months, where before, when they build these models, because we have all the Juniper libraries of their solution, and they could just drag and drop and decide what tenants, what regions, what resources are needed, and literally be able to address the TAM question, the profitability question, and the solution question, and engage with their customers to maximize. So that's a subscription license. I encourage everyone to reach out to Juniper to do a customized model under the BAE system there for that. Yeah.
Yes, I do as well. We've had lots of customers positive feedback on the tools that we're able to leverage with Ray, and so that's a great program that we provide.
And you know what, Karen, one thing that I should have added too is that when it gets to modeling, sometimes it's scary to some people, right? They're either engineers or they're technical, is the methodology question on how you do it. Normally you're fumbling around. Now it's a visual way. It's a visual way where you see everything is connected to it. So you're able to explain the economic model to any customer visually, and the outcomes are visually. So it does simplify the concept of developing these complex models.
It does. It definitely does. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you both, and I'd like to thank all of our attendees here. We're at our time limit, and so please reach out to your Juniper sales rep or account manager if you have any interest in learning more about what we talked about here. And we thank you all for coming. Thank you to Ray. Thank you to Liliane, and look forward to the next time. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.